Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. My guest this time out is Šimon Šafránek, a successful documentary filmmaker whose work often explores alternative culture. Šimon's latest project is CzechTek, the Story of Czech Rave, a new podcast centered on a free techno music festival that drew tens of thousands and culminated, pretty much exactly 2 decades ago, in clashes between riot police and participants. And I discuss all that and more now with Šimon Šafránek in this edition of Prague Talk. So Šimon, tell us a little bit about your background. You are a journalist by profession. How did you get into journalism, and I guess particularly arts journalism?
It was all kind of like by chance, really. Because I think it's like, 25 years, maybe longer. And I was offered this, to run this like web magazine for cinema. But still, it was more like a job for me. I wanted to make movies and it was kind of difficult. And then we did a documentary on Nick Cave fans. And then I lived in Berlin. And then I came back. And then I worked in magazine, which was actually fun because before that, I was kind of dread to make interviews, I didn't want to speak to people. And then I was doing interviews in the magazine and I kind of like started to like it really. And it was fun to go to Cannes Film Festival and such. But still I wanted to make movies. And then I kind of found a way with documentaries like King's Gate, which played really well here. And then we made this portrait of Miroš Birka called Mackie. And so on. Yeah, so now basically journalism is just it's a hobby for me really, because I think also with the change of the landscape economically and stuff. So now I just go to Cannes Film Festival and that's it basically.
And as a filmmaker, are you kind of self-taught or did you study?
I'm more like self-taught really, because I think I applied for FAMU like 2 times and never made it through the process. Yeah, and then there was this time where I started to go more often than not to Berlin and started to live there, blah blah. And then it was just probably too late to go to school. Although I think it's great if you can go to school, but just didn't.
Well, you eventually won even a Czech Lion for King's Gate. King's Gate is about skateboarders here in Czechoslovakia under communism. What was the appeal for you of this subject, this community of skaters here in the 70s and 80s, I guess?
There was this book, which is called Prkínka na maso jsme uřízli. And when I saw the photos, and it's like an oral history of it, and I saw the photos there, and it was just amazing. And I thought, wow, if there was any archive footage, like video or film, it would make for a great film, I think. And it was there, so that was great. And also I think it's a huge contribution by my editor, Šimon Šafránek, who really did a great job there. And he was a skater too, so sometimes he would just say, hey, this is interesting, this is maybe not so interesting. But yeah, the whole thing was interesting, exotic in a way, really. And like great memories of that time when we did the movie.
Also, you've worked on projects, for example, about Czech rap. I guess one of your biggest films has been Mackie, about the Slovak pop singer Miroslav Žbírka. He, unlike a lot of your subjects, was not in any way underground. What was the attraction of Miroslav Žbírka as a subject?
But we made it a little bit in that way, because there was a certain time in his career in the 80s when he had this band called Limit with Laco Lucenic, and they made like 3 really interesting kind of new wave records with really modern sound for the time, and a little bit like depressing lyrics, or it was just different lyrics than it wasn't these like happy socialism whatever lyrics. And I knew a couple of them, and we used 1 or 2 of these songs in King's Gate because it went really well with that kind of punk rock, electro, clashy sound of the soundtrack. So it was a great opportunity to put this story into film, you know.
Now I believe you're working on a film about the great Czech artist Krzysztof Kintora. I can already imagine it next year at Karlovy Vary. I'm not sure what your plans are, of course, for the film, but how has it been working on this film about Krzysztof?
It's crazy, but it's lovely. I mean, it's really great. It's interesting because I think we work closely. It's also like there is a different approach because it's not, you know, like Kingskate or Mackie.
It's not archive stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of, even like Rap Story, there was a lot of archives. This is less so, and it's more about like the creative process, more about the creation itself. Yeah, what do we want to say with the picture? No, it's really interesting, and let's just see.
Also, I don't know Krzysztof very well, but I do know that he has an unusually kind of unique perspective on the world. He really sees things in a unique way, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's true. I think he has a great sense of humor that we want to put in there. You know, the thing is, it's not like a classical documentary portrait like, hello, I'm Krzysztof and I do art. I mean, come on, I'm not really interested in that at all. Basically, at first, he didn't want to be in a picture, like physically. Now it's changing, but it's really this kind of dialogue with his art and the art talking back, and it's still like super living. So it's a little bit hard for me to talk about it because it's like everything is changing. And it's actually funny because he's got this, or his company is called Všechno je jinak, like everything is different, which is kind of synonymous to the film in a way, in a good way, I hope.
Well, the reason I wanted to speak to you right now, Šimon, is that you have a new podcast out called CzechTek for the Czech radio station Vltava about the famous free techno event that was held here annually in the Czech countryside from 1994 onwards. What was it that made you think that CzechTek would be a good topic to explore?
I think it's a subject that's very close to my heart. I used to go to free parties like 25 years ago or something, which is crazy to say that. But, and then I wrote a book, kind of like road movie type of book called 23, which was based on my memories or whatever, my experiences. It was a story of like a fictitious group of people who would be a sound system traveling around Europe. And I loved that lifestyle. And then I was actually thinking about making a kind of documentary or a film, you know. Yeah, like documentaries, some kind of essay, whatever, I don't know. But there was this television documentary from Rosalia Kohoutová, CzechTek, I think like 6-7 years ago. So I thought it would be much interesting actually, and also a challenge to do it as a podcast, but not like just people talking, but really using the imagination of audio, of like sound effects and music, put it all together and make it like a story of the Czech Rave from the roots of 1994 was the first free festival. There were these like English sound system that would come to Czech, namely Mutual Waste Company with Joe Rush, who would like start these parties at in England, in London or something, because he was working on films, on set designs. It was really funny because and he was telling me this, and I was asking, what films did you work on? I was like, Alien, Star Wars, Dune, and I was like, oh.
Well, it makes sense, right? When you think about what they produce, these enormous
Yeah.
kind of post-apocalyptic works of like huge pieces of metal and God knows what.
And there is then no use for it after the shoot. So he was thinking it would be great to really put parties into this environment. So he did that, and then you know they had to leave England because of the
law changed, right? I had not heard this term for years, repetitive beats. This was part of the legislation in the mid-90s that basically forced traveler / rave culture out of the UK into mainland Europe.
Yeah. And they would basically colonize the Europe with this style of techno music and this lifestyle. It's traveler's lifestyle. And they would come to Czech in 94 with this huge convoy of like Russian fighter jets.
It's also an amazing detail that these MiG planes, a few years earlier, the Russians had been kicked out of Czechoslovakia, and now they're coming back. These planes are coming back and ending up at this airfield in Hostomice, where the first edition of CzechTek was held.
Yeah, and it's it's crazy. And I think this Mad Max element to it is really interesting visually. I really love that. Yeah, so it was great to just talk to this guy, you know.
Also, one thing that I didn't know anything about was you find out in the podcast that this whole scene, in a way, started in this country from Obecny Dům, where there were these bars run by Westerners, and some of the staff were involved in like spreading the word about the first big free festivals.
Yeah. Well, I think the expat community in early or mid-90s was really influential culturally. Of course, because they were like bringing in trends and things that just weren't here. I mean, here in like 94, 93, there was no internet.
It was the classic thing, you had to make a phone call. You had to call somebody, you drive around, call from a petrol station, call some number.
Yeah, like when
to find out where the venue was.
Yeah. I mean, it was like logistics of it was that there was a answering machine and there was a short message there, and you would have to call to that number. Then you would know where is it, or at least like in general. And I remember those parties in the late 90s where we would just go, you know, countryside, some forest, then you would just kill the engine, listen
where's the beats,
and where is the music, or where is some lights or whatever, and you would just drive around like that, because there were no phones.
How big did CzechTek, which I guess was every year, how big did it get at its peak?
I think at its peak it was like 20 to 40,000 people. So I think basically it kind of follows the same wave as in UK with this party at Castle Morton, which was basically the same, around like 20, 30,000 people. It was meant to be much smaller, then it got out of the hand. Yeah, and there were the repercussions by the state. And here it was basically the same with that twist that the government was basically leftist government, which I think was crazy to think that, leftist government would kill the party.
Well, prior to the most famous CzechTek of 2005, how did people in these country places view these trucks coming in full of young people and the noise and I presume also the dirt, let's say in the 90s?
Well, I think it would be as any place else, because really when I read some stuff about Castle Morton, it was the people who would live there, and they would be angry at the ravers, they would be angry at the police that they do nothing and blah, 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 and they would call really probably their people in the parliament. Here I think it was the same. Like some people would be angry that they couldn't sleep. Some people would be amazed. I think that there was really strong negative coverage by the media. You know, it works like clickbait, I guess, in today's terms. So they would really push that image of noise, dirt, drugs, lawlessness. And the really interesting thing and as the guys also talk about it in the podcast, is that when the scene is smaller, it's just such a difference when you come to a free party where nobody controls it, because people are friendly, people help each other, and it's like this feeling of like super freedom, liberty.
Sounds almost utopian.
It is, of course. And of course, then as it attracts more and more people, this like anonymity of the crowd kicks in from the other side, and of course bad stuff happens.
For people who don't know, what happened in 2005? For most people, if they think of the name CzechTek, they're thinking of that edition, which was the last one, at least I guess in the original spirit.
It started to grow really big after the turn of the century. Even in Prague, when there were like smaller parties, you go 1 week, there will be 200 people. You go next week, there will be 400 people, and it would just explode. It would be the same for CzechTek. It grew exponentially. I think since like 2003, there was a news coverage in rozhlas, in television, everywhere. There would be reporters from Nova, television, and whatever. And it was just too much.
Well, when you say it was too much, still the police didn't have to intervene like they did.
Yeah,
the government didn't have to react like they did.
There was this government that would basically have it as a mission. It was a mission for them to basically go against the ravers. It was probably easy target for them because they would be different. And I think the aggression kind of built up too. Because before 2005, there was already, I think in 2004, some bigger party that would be cancelled by the police a little bit violently, so to say. And this was just, those were the orders to just kill it, so they would kill it.
Was it the case that this confrontation between the police and young people hadn't happened like that since before 1990, because the police in the 90s kind of kept their heads down and wanted to kind of shake off their reputation from the commie days?
Yeah. There was the image, and when you had when you really had this image of the police in a full force, in full gear, standing against like kids or the girls and the dancers and the ravers, I think most of the common people would see the same.
It looks like earlier in '89.
Yeah. The memories were there. Then there were these protests in Prague.
Or even Havel was there.
Yeah. So, and most of course, then it would become a political issue where the right-wing parties would say it was unacceptable, which it was. And then ultimately, I think it would cost them the elections. So the left-wing party, they would lose the election also because of this, because it was such a strong display of force against youth. And and the first one of this size since 1989. I think of course there will be these like evictions of squads and stuff, but it was like lesser scale. This was like huge.
You obviously did a lot of research working on this project. Was there anything, even for somebody who was there anything that you feel like you learned about the whole rave culture here in this country?
I think what was really interesting was to compare 90s with today, especially in regards of like freedom. What was perceived as freedom in 90s, basically do whatever until you reach the reaction of somebody else. With today, where you basically limit yourself prior to the action. On the other hand, it would be very easy to just preach on that. But we got to take in account that the organizers of CzechTek would cancel it after that 05 edition. There was actually 06 edition that was somehow...
on some army land or something, was it?
Yeah. The area was, or the space was granted by the state, by the army. So it was basically legal, and the battle for the legalization of this movement was kind of won, which was interesting argument when I spoke to the Czech organizers or the Czech techno people and the people from England, because people from England would be basically, if the argument was won, it would be better to continue the event, somehow keep this dialogue with the society, while the Czech techno people would just cancel the event because in their eyes, it would lose its ideals, heritage. There was nothing, because they saw it as a sellout, and they wanted to have their own thing without the eyes of the society, basically. They would just say there will be no more CzechTek happening anymore in the future. And that was the case. So they would basically, we don't want to do that.
They prefer to kill it than compromise.
Yeah, they prefer to kill it than compromise, exactly. And when I talk about this with Joe, for example, we are doing Glastonbury, which is not corporate, but of course it's a compromise. But then life is full of compromise, and if you don't do any compromises, you end up alone somewhere in the corner. This was really interesting kind of debate, or to see that from both angles, because I think both angles are completely legit. But it shows that even like 20 years ago, there was this group of people who wouldn't exploit their freedom, although they could, in a way.
Many thanks indeed to Šimon Šafránek for speaking to me for Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you're a first-time listener and enjoyed our talk, why not check out some of the scores of other conversations in the series? And of course, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. But for now, that's all from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you guys again very soon.